Greetings fellow gamers, I'm the Soulsborne Seeker and today I'll be reviewing MIO, Memories in Orbit, a science fiction Metroidvania game developed by Douze Digem and released on the 20th of January 2026 for PC, PS5, Nintendo Switch 1 and 2, as well as the Xbox Series X and Series S. The story follows MIO, a nimble robot that awakens inside the vessel, a huge spacecraft drifting aimlessly across the cosmos, its initial purpose now lost in time, its ruined interior taken over by overgrown vegetation and machines gone rogue. Devoid of memories and with time working against it, MIO will have to dive into the depths of the vessel in order to reawaken its AI caretakers before the craft shuts down completely, in the process uncovering the reason behind its downfall. The game's narrative is incredibly nuanced and delivered with almost literary efficiency, as its well-written dialogue, engaging journal entries, skilled cutscene direction, and haunting environmental storytelling give it an almost dark fairy tale quality, which is further accentuated by a sublime soundtrack comprised of some of the most poignant melodies I have had the pleasure of experiencing. The plot is enhanced by the presence of numerous odd, eccentric, and ethereal characters, each one functioning as a small piece of the puzzle that is the overarching story by providing bits and pieces of lore, sometimes directly, while other times in cryptic and nearly poetic fashion. The superior narrative and auditory elements of MIO ring true for the setting as well, with the vessel boasting an impressive array of imaginatively designed biomes that are not only masterfully interconnected in an organic way, but also rendered in an amazing cel-shaded art style that makes the whole thing seem like a painting brought to life. Each area is a visual marvel that acts as a character of its own, with their distinct hues as well as unique flora, architecture, and robotic fauna adding to the spacecraft's enigmatic history and offering insights for the observant wanderers. I cannot overstate how well designed the game's world is, fusing seamlessly man-made structures with intrusive overgrowth in a way that makes it seem as if that was their natural state from the get-go. Said incredible craftsmanship also extends to the world's interconnectedness, with MIO having some of the most ingeniously organic shortcut and pathway placements I have ever experienced in the genre, effectively making each venture down a new path an exciting endeavor, given that a lot of them either lead to useful secrets or open up new biomes unexpectedly, thus making exploration an exercise in wonder. Speaking of exploration, the vessel is home to a significant number of discoverables, with many of them aimed towards strengthening yourself, which, as we'll see later on, is paramount if you want to survive its hostile residents. There are a total of 7 different types of collectibles ready to be claimed here, namely coating components, modifiers, modifier extensions, tendrils, journal entries, old cores, and finally, nacre droplets. Coating components increase your health by 1 shield when collected in groups of 4. Modifiers correspond to certain modules that either offer advantages or a mix of advantages and disadvantages, and can be equipped at the cost of slots, with your slot capacity being upgradable via the procurement of modifier extensions, thus allowing you room to utilize more modifiers. Tendrils, which are your tool of attack, are scavenged from decommissioned androids and added to your own arsenal, permanently increasing your damage output in the process. Journal entries flesh out the world's lore as well as provide insight into its residents and their motivations. Old cores are taken from inactive robots and are a form of currency necessary to purchase items from a merchant. Finally, nacre droplets are the game's main currency, which are both used in order to barter for goods on sale as well as for healing purposes, as we'll discuss later on. Staying a bit on the exploratory aspect of the game, the map overview is quite useful and thankfully logistically accurate, though there are some things that could be added in order to increase its efficiency. On the positive side, the overview features drawings of major points of interest, thus making navigation to them easier. It also marks down save points, healing shrines, locked doors, elevators, as well as openings to sections you have not yet explored. Furthermore, it provides a total of 15 manual markers of various designs, which you can place wherever you want, and as always, I highly recommend you start using them immediately since, as far as my playthrough is concerned, I wasn't able to find any way to automatically mark down collectibles, which is always a downside. Another thing that might frustrate some people is the fact that the map is not revealed in real time, but rather gets marked down after visiting a save point, which I personally didn't mind, but I can see how others might not share the sentiment. Fast traveling across the spacecraft is carried out via save points, but only after you have found their respective overseers, who have been separated from them and need to be nudged back in the right direction. Moving on to platforming, this is a definite standout of MIO MIO, with the vessel hiding numerous acrobatic trials that were as challenging as they were fun, courtesy not only of their creative design, but also of one of the game's main traversal mechanics, namely energy. More specifically, performing any sort of movement-related ability happens at the cost of energy, which is a bar visible at the bottom of the screen. Said bar depletes when such an ability is performed, and replenishes either in gradual fashion by coming in contact with the ground, or immediately if you hit an enemy or other environmental element, such as some purple blooms, even if you're airborne. This results in some ridiculously hectic and exciting platforming segments where reflexes are as important as keen observation, since you're constantly on the lookout for the next foe or interactable object to hit as you jump, fling, and float across hazard-infested gauntlets on your way to safety. Said instances, while incredibly difficult at times, never felt unfair, mostly due to the game's generous checkpoint system, which essentially corresponded to any place you could stand during a platforming challenge, as well as some smartly placed breakable walls that opened up shortcuts which allowed you to avoid repetition of gauntlets you had already overcome. I should also mention that hitboxes during those instances were on point, thus making these trials less punishing by allowing you to have close calls with harmful obstacles as you grazed past them, effectively making you feel like a demented daredevil. On an added note, I want to give a special shout out to the way MIO has you earn its traversal abilities, which happens via brief platforming sections that also function as tutorials, that I thought were quite on point with the overall theme of the game. Combat-wise, this is another aspect of MIO that felt incredibly engaging, this time due to the brilliance hiding in its simplicity. The game focuses solely on melee combat when it comes to your own approach at defeating foes, which you do via the use of the incandescent tendrils sprouting from your head. Said tendrils are capable of performing a 3-hit combo that is hefty and carries weight, making it extremely satisfying to perform without ever growing tedious. Your battle arsenal is further enhanced by the use of the aforementioned modifiers, which can only be managed at save points and cost slots to be utilized, whose capacity you can increase via the use of modifier extensions, thus affording yourself room for more modifiers. These modules can actually make a world of difference to both combat and exploration, so I do recommend checking them out whenever you feel stuck in combat or unable to continue exploration, since they may be just what you need to persevere. Healing is carried out at special shrines and costs Nacre droplets by default, though using the right modifier removes the cost. Perishing leads to permanent loss of your gathered currency, unless said currency has been crystallized with the help of specific robots scattered across the vessel, which is how you get to keep it. A mechanic that never bothers me, but I understand it's not everyone's cup of tea. Finally, combat is rounded out by a snappy deflection move that, when timed correctly, absorbs all damage from enemies, which I highly recommend you learn how to use, since beating some of the game's bosses will become a much easier endeavor. Speaking of bosses, boy oh boy did MIO bring its best self to the party in that regard. The big bads present here are amongst the most entertainingly designed in terms of attack patterns, with movesets that are not only appropriately telegraphed but also incredibly diverse, leading to bouts that almost feel like high-stakes dances, largely in part to the seamless fluidity of your base movement as well as that of your traversal skills, which you will use to bob and weave through their attacks. No single boss was reminiscent of another, and all of them were absurdly fun to duke it out with. Make no mistake, these villains are no pushovers, and will give you a run for your money, especially during your initial attempts against them, but you'll soon realize that pattern recognition and solid reflexes are the name of the game here, and before long, you'll be skillfully taking down foes that made you feel despair the first time you stepped foot in their arena. I should also mention that there were a few runbacks here after I lost some of the fights, but they were nothing notable, with the longest having taken me about 20 seconds to return across very manageable terrain. On to difficulty, MIO Memories in Orbit sits confidently in the incredibly challenging side of things, especially when it comes to some of its platforming segments and most of its bosses, though it never comes off as unfair. As a matter of fact, this is hands down the most balanced Metroidvania experience I remember having, since there wasn't a single second during my playthrough that I ever felt like I was overpowered, instead mostly playing catch up with the increasingly punishing big bads, something that also forced me to think more tactically about my approach to fighting, and had me constantly trying out new modifier builds to see what works in any given situation. On that note, I did experience a strange occurrence twice, if I remember correctly, where for some reason the game permanently reduced my overall health by 1 shield each time. This probably ties to the story in a way that I haven't understood, so I won't expand upon it, but but it did make me feel a bit disheartened every time it happened. That being said, there are a few accessibility options that you can activate here, which make both healing as well as boss fights more manageable, so do keep that in mind. As for length, it took me 15 hours to complete the game with 85% completion rate without the true ending, with an estimated additional 3 to 4 hours for 100% depending on player skill and observation levels. For a price of about $20, this is an absolute steal, especially when considering the overall quality on offer. In conclusion, my time with MIO Memories in Orbit was phenomenal. I was completely immersed in its vibrant world, I loved its music, lore and storytelling approach, I was dumbfounded by the masterful interconnectivity of the setting, which made exploration a true wonder, I had a blast with platforming, I adored combat and was unbelievably impressed by the bosses. I do wish there was some way for collectibles to be marked automatically on the map, and I wasn't fond of the permanent reduction of my health, the reason for which still eludes me even though it is most likely story related, but these were just minor annoyances in an otherwise stellar experience. MIO Memories in Orbit is one of those rare Metroidvania offerings which remind you that video games can be both entertaining and meaningful, which is what truly elevates them to work of art status, thus making this not only one of the best Metroidvanias I have ever played, but also the first contender for Game of the Year in the genre. My final verdict on MIO Memories in Orbit is 9.4 out of 10. Before we close, if MIO Memories in Orbit looks to be right up your alley and you're considering purchasing the game, I would kindly ask you to do so by using the link you can find in the video description, courtesy of Fanatical, which allows you to get an official Steam key of the game and at the same time helps support the channel. Thank you for considering helping me in that way, and an even greater thank you to those who go through with a purchase. Your support means the world to me. With that being said, what did you think about MIO Memories in Orbit? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out.